Scenes from a Revolution. A week in August 1991. The Soviet Union will never be the same.
Hello, I'm Mark Walton at the Kremlin. This land is at a turning point. The French historian de Tocqueville said the most dangerous time is when a bad government begins to reform itself. That process of reform is underway here today. And along with the possibility of transformation comes the potential for chaos.
The Soviet Union was created out of the ashes of World War I. Lenin's vision, stoked by the fires of revolution against a corrupt monarchy. A collection of republics united under communism, sometimes willingly, sometimes not. The idea of workers controlling their own lives was powerful and persuasive. But when ideas were not enough, terror and coercion finished the job. The end of World War II brought superpower status to the USSR, making it one of two nations able to totally alter the planet in a mere atomic moment. With arsenals poised for overkill and the icy politics of the Cold War, Soviets and Americans lived in a world of mutual distrust and suspicion. And then came Gorbachev, rising to power after the death of Chernenko, permanently shaking the Kremlin status quo. The fourth generation of leadership in the Soviet system, Gorbachev inherited a bankrupt government filled with ideas that did not work and gray old men of the past. Gorbachev brought glasnost and perestroika, openness and restructuring. They brought him the love and admiration of millions. He granted Eastern Europe its freedom and hailed the end of the Cold War. But while celebrated abroad, he was often condemned at home. An economy built around a massive military could not put bread on the shelves. Gorbachev's popularity plummeted dangerously. He chose to walk a fine line between reformers pressing for rapid change and the old guard, resistant to compromise, rooted in the past. Things went from bad to worse. A collapsing economy, political stalemate, a discredited system, disgusted citizens, all pointing toward impending chaos. Some republics demanded freedom from Soviet domination. Repression in the streets only strengthened their resolve. Among communists, there was chaos as well. 4 million members quit the party in 18 months. Key reformers deserted Gorbachev's government, warning of treachery from the right. As hardliners plotted, determined to fight the currents of change, Gorbachev agreed to sign a new Union treaty, granting power to the republics at the expense of the elite. This was where history stood, when, in an act of desperation, the gray old men made their move.
Sunday, August 18th, 1991. The man who tried to restructure the old communist empire fell victim to its repressive past. Mikhail Gorbachev's vacation dacha became his personal gulag. During his captivity, the Soviet president made an extraordinary home video. Released after his return, it shows what really happened to the ousted president.
On Sunday, around 5 p.m., I discovered that all my government telephone lines had been cut off and the television was no longer working.
This report just in, coming from the respected Reuters news agency, quoting a report out of London. It says that Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev is no longer exercising his duties.
Vice President Gennady Yanayev, according to the official TASS news agency, has taken over as president of the Soviet Union as of today, Monday in the Soviet Union.
You're looking now at pictures of the announcement on Soviet television. The announcement that Soviet Vice President Gennady Yanayev took over as president of the USSR on Monday.
The vice president referred to my ill health, which forced him to assume my duties, but I am healthy.
Due to health reasons, Gorbachev is unable to carry out his responsibilities as president of the Soviet Union.
The agency
Therefore,
cites, quoting here, Gorbachev's inability to perform his duties for health reasons.
I think we have a clear sign here that whether Mr. Gorbachev is in fact ill or not, we have on our hands here a putsch from the right wing.
consisting of Vaklanov, first deputy of the USSR, Kryuchkov, chairman of the KGB, Pavlov, Soviet prime minister, Pugo, interior minister, Yazov, defense minister.
The new Soviet president has declared a 6-month state of emergency throughout the Soviet Union. Once again repeating that.
I was supposed to arrive in Moscow on the 19th in order to take part in the signing of the new Union Treaty with the 6 republics and the Kremlin.
The signing of that Union Treaty on Tuesday, which would have done a great deal to remove the power of the central government. I think we're seeing exactly how that timing forced this event to occur just this day.
They say they're doing this all with an aim of overcoming the profound and comprehensive crisis, political, ethnic, and civil strife, chaos, and anarchy.
We're determined without further delay to restore law and order, stop the bloodshed, and to wage a relentless war on the criminal underworld and to root out social...
The question has been whether a regime such as this would be driven out by the will of the people in a relatively short period of time. It could be very bloody if that happens. And in the end...
A military state of emergency means a reliance on force which is dangerous. It can cause a catastrophe on a national level. It can cast our country into civil war.
Tanks are rolling in the streets of Moscow at this hour as the Soviet Union...
A column of armored personnel carriers and assorted other military vehicles pass by our offices.
This looks like the old Moscow that I knew at the time that I was there back in the late 1970s in Cold War days.
Moscow Echo, the independent radio station that Muscovites have turned to for their news, has been jammed ever since.
Obviously setting the tone, letting the Soviet people know that this is serious, serious business. The Soviet people heard about it.
President Bush's vacation is interrupted by the news. Awakened Sunday night with events happening too quickly to sort out, Bush's first public response Monday morning is considered too cautious by some.
I don't know whether to take heart or not from Yaniev's statement that this does not mean turning back the reforms.
But he also sounds what would be a prophetic note.
It's also important to know that coups can fail. They can take over at first, and then they run up against the will of the people.
In a crisis mode, the president rushes back to Washington, while Soviet Ambassador Komplektov delivers messages from the hardliners to the State Department. Then come emergency messages from behind the barricades in Moscow. First a phone call to the U.S. Embassy, then in a letter to President Bush, Boris Yeltsin and the newly formed resistance plead for help. By evening, Bush toughens his stance and calls for Gorbachev's return. A U.S. official admits Washington didn't know until Monday afternoon there was anyone to support. British Prime Minister John Major is quicker to condemn the conspirators.
There seems little doubt that President Gorbachev has been removed from power by an unconstitutional seizure of power.
European foreign ministers hold emergency meetings. Within 24 hours, they decide to cut off more than $1 billion of aid to the Soviet Union.
The community will suspend its economic assistance in the form of existing credits for food supplies and in the form of technical assistance.
But some welcome the coup, saying good riddance to Gorbachev. Saddam Hussein in Iraq, Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, hardline Palestinians. Fears rise that recent progress in the Middle East peace process will be sabotaged, a process promoted jointly by the United States and Mikhail Gorbachev's foreign ministry.
It would be very counterproductive to have it go back to square one in the Middle East when we have an opportunity for a breakthrough.
In Czechoslovakia, thousands gather in Prague's Wenceslas Square to protest the coup and commemorate the 1968 Prague Spring, when Soviet troops put down a democratic rebellion against hardline communism. No matter how improbable, the specter of a new Soviet invasion, a new Iron Curtain, rises in the minds of some Eastern Europeans. Alarmed by the crisis, officials from Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and Poland hold emergency meetings in Warsaw. Yet Polish leader Lech Walesa is conspicuously low-key. With 50,000 Soviet soldiers still on Polish soil, Walesa urges calm, but does not call for an end to the coup. Czech President Václav Havel dispatches 6,000 troops to reinforce his border with the Soviet Union. He has more freedom to act. Soviet troops have already left Czechoslovakia. In Bulgaria, still closely tied to the Soviet Union, peasants are more concerned with feeding themselves than world politics. Still, there's television, and there's apprehension.
We saw it all on TV last night. It's very bad. Let's hope there's no civil war. There's no bloodshed. We're hoping in Bulgaria the same thing. There's no civil war. There's peace and everything.
German Chancellor Kohl cancels a vacation to hustle back to Bonn, Of all Western leaders, he perhaps is closest to Gorbachev, the man who approved Kohl's plan to reunify Germany. A worried Kohl calls on the coup leaders to honor the agreement to pull Soviet troops out of Germany. Nearly 300,000 still remain.
QRC 1064. 4900.
Shockwaves vibrate through world financial markets. Soviet instability triggers panic selling, especially in Germany, the Soviets' biggest trading partner in the West. The German market plunges more than 9% this day. Japan down 6%. London down more than 3%. The U.S. down only about 2%, but grain prices are on the skids, and U.S. farmers are worried, afraid they'll lose their biggest customer for corn. Though world leaders condemn the coup, it's possible it will prevail. Around the world, nervous people try to make contact with friends and relatives inside.
I would like to place a call to Lithuania.
I'm sorry, no lines right now, sir.
This coup has ignited a bonfire of fear, kindled by memories of a harsh and cruel Soviet past. But for anxious citizen and politician alike, there is a spark of hope, a growing resistance movement, symbolized and inspired by one charismatic man.
We declare illegal all decisions and resolutions issued by the committee. We are sure local bodies of power will abide by all constitutional laws and decrees of the President of Russia.
I think the seeds of confrontation may have been sown this morning by Boris Yeltsin, the president.
Crowds of demonstrators surrounded tanks on Minsk Square.
I think this is high noon in the Soviet Union, and that's what...
Throughout Moscow, people are taking their own actions to protest. But the question...
The general has a machine gun. Is he preparing to use it against us?
Don't assume that everyone in uniform will obey orders, he said. The army will never fight against its own people.
Гордый взгляд из-под надменных бровей.
One of the most tumultuous days in recent Soviet history is drawing to a close, a day that has caused anxiety in the West.
Quiet in the Soviet capital right now. The streets are virtually deserted. The bridge behind me, which was the scene of so much activity.
Boris Yeltsin. Many are outside the Russian Federation building right now. Some are actually singing folk songs. A song which says,
Как это все-таки важно однажды не
Inside the Russian Federation building, and an apparent split beginning to show in this coup, which is now set to be
announced. Tanks and troops loyal to Russian President Boris Yeltsin have surrounded the Russian Parliament building in Moscow. They're there to protect Yeltsin.
We've come here to guard this place. Our mission is to put a guard around the building.
We're for Yeltsin. Everybody. Everybody's for Yeltsin.
Then why are you here?
I've never heard this kind of order before. This kind of order doesn't exist.
Do you think they'll shoot?
Of course I would rather not shoot.
What do you think, as a human being, about this situation?
How do you suppose I feel if I have to shoot my own people? I'm sorry for the soldiers. I'm sorry for them if we have to get into a real battle. If they order us to shoot or throw grenades, I don't know. It's impossible for us to know if anyone will obey the orders. And if they won't, that's something else.
Patrick, indeed, thousands of people, tens of thousands of people are indeed rallying. They have been blocked from the center of the city of Mali.
Had sprung up. The stark images.
To speak to the crowd. He is making increasingly strident demands. So far this morning we have heard from
We demand an examination of the health of Mikhail Gorbachev, and upon positive results, his return to power.
In democratic Moscow, the conservative forces will be stopped. Democracy will triumph.
Any politician should be there where his people are.
This is now a city under siege.
That's very helpful indeed. The opposition is growing by the hour. This is the most important thing right now.
There's a great deal of anger there. But oddly enough...
Massive use of force. And it's clear they would have to kill thousands of people in many different
carriers,
parts.
and tension has been rising rapidly. There were tanks on the streets.
Soviet tanks and troops are still on the move in Moscow. They've also rolled into
the critical hour, the announcer said, there is mortal danger for our motherland.
I would guess a mood of quiet defiance, though not...
There was also people lighting candles. Also outside, there were actually some people singing. There was bread being passed to the soldiers. People also...
You've got mutinies. You've had mutinies right in the middle of the heart of Moscow.
Information that Soviet troops will attack the building within 2 hours. All
report earlier that possibly it had been booby-trapped with mines. Do you know anything about that?
The honor of Russian arms will not be covered with the blood of our people.
From Kremlin forces, there are sudden fears that the Soviet coup may be about to turn bloody. President Bush has sworn in his
and armored vehicles reportedly is moving toward the center of Moscow. Speculation has been
intimidated the coup leaders as troops moving towards Boris Yeltsin's Russian parliament. The tension that had been building for 2 days.
I came here at 6 o'clock this morning. I didn't go to work. I didn't go anywhere. My wife said, "Don't go. You have 2 children to think about." But I don't want my children to be slaves all their lives.
This is our last chance to get this freedom, so spiritual death is almost just like physical death.
in Moscow a rainy night and a night full of tension as people wait to see what is going to be happening.
It's gotten quite tense. They're running a continuous
Has this curfew been?
Well, the curfew has been completely ineffective, and the big problem that the military has in trying to enforce it. People were rushing, put on gas masks, trying to take up defensive positions.
People are reported to have been shot dead near the Russian Republic Parliament. That's where thousands of anti-coup civilians
of the vehicle. At least 2 bodies were seen lying on the pavement under sheets on the street not far from the U.S. Embassy.
As the drama unfolds on the streets of Moscow, the conspirators try to tighten their grip on the Baltics, and resistance hardens around the country. In Kiev, capital of the Ukraine, thousands protest the takeover. Parliament declares all coup orders null and void. Ukrainian coal miners prepare to walk off the job, with strikes already reported in Siberia and the north. Protesters fill the streets in Moldavia's capital. The Prime Minister bans newspapers approved by the coup. Hundreds of thousands of demonstrators rally in Leningrad. The mayor charges the seizure of power is unconstitutional. Kazakhstan's president denounces the takeover. His counterpart in Uzbekistan outlaws all coup orders. A major target for those who would seize power, the Baltics. A show of force. The coup orders a naval blockade. Paratroopers loyal to the hardliners take over the airport near Tallinn, Estonia. Soviet troops take over communication centers throughout the Baltics. Lithuanian President Landsbergis calls for acts of civil disobedience. There are sporadic clashes. 1 person is killed. Mikhail Gorbachev is still out of sight.
And I've twice tried to reach him by phone, including within the last hour, but have so far been unsuccessful.
But remarkably, the coup committee does not cut communication links.
Are you, quite frankly, surprised you are still on the air?
Well, I am to a degree. I thought that we would last on the air perhaps a couple of hours yesterday.
The self-proclaimed emergency committee bans certain newspapers, but they publish anyway, with no interference. Echo Radio, ordered to stop broadcasting, defies the order within 20 minutes with live reports from the barricades. Yeltsin supporters establish a maverick radio station inside the Parliament building.
Ельцину и осудил смещение президента Горбачева.
The Voice of America and BBC continue to beam Russian-language reports. Gorbachev follows events in his Dacha prison. His captors did not think to confiscate his radio. Remarkably, Yeltsin is able to phone Western leaders. He says Soviet troops are about to storm the Parliament building. He fears he has little time. Russian TV videotapes a speech that subsequently spreads around the world.
Soldiers, I believe at the tragic hour you will make the right decision. The owner of Russian arms will not be covered with the blood of the people.
Yeltsin's pleas underscore the crucial fundamental question of this revolt. Will Soviet soldiers obey orders to attack the resistors? As the world waits, there are hints that all is not well with the junta.
We have just received an item of late news. Prime Minister Pavlov has had a heart attack.
There was even rumors that Mr. Yazov, the defense ministry, was also sick, which
a lot
again,
of sickness running through the Soviet leadership in these first few hours after the coup, and I think
apparently something is happening among the senior leaders of the 8-man committee.
The coup leaders play a final card, giving orders to storm Yeltsin's parliament and shoot anything in sight. But the elite KGB Alpha team refuses. U.S. intelligence detects a flurry of messages from the defense ministry in Moscow, but few replies. The Soviet Navy, silent. The Soviet Air Force, silent. Strategic Missile Forces, silent. The plot is unraveling. Now there are signals it was disorganized from the start. The figurehead new president, Gennady Yanayev, appears nervous and shaken at an early news conference. Subsequent reports indicate Yanayev and co-conspirator Valentin Pavlov were drunk when talked into ousting Gorbachev, and may have been drunk throughout the coup attempt. Gorbachev aide Veniamin Yarin says he saw Yanayev in the Kremlin.
There was fear in his eyes. He was drunk.
Unbelievably, Yarin and other Gorbachev loyalists claimed they mounted resistance to the coup from a Kremlin office 2 doors away from Yanayev.
We contacted the commandant of the Kremlin, and he said immediately that he was for the president, and the commandant put all his troops under our command.
A single phone call indicates to the West that the crisis is over.
I had a phone conversation with Mikhail Gorbachev. It was a good call. Gorbachev is still in the Crimea. He will return either tonight or tomorrow to Moscow. People know of my respect for Gorbachev, indeed the way I feel about him, and I was just delighted to hear that he was fine.
Yeltsin loyalists head for the Crimea to pick up Gorbachev. The defense ministry orders all troops to leave Moscow. Traffic police command tanks and would-be jaywalkers. Order is returning to Moscow. The Soviet parliament nullifies all coup decrees, and Gorbachev is restored to power. 72 hours after it started comes the official word.
The coup d'etat has failed. The president is in good health. This national catastrophe has been averted.
A tired Gorbachev arrives at a Moscow airport.
The objective was to crush the president morally, to crush his family, but they have failed.
Early in the morning, his motorcade heads into town. Though a free man, Gorbachev is speeding into a most uncertain political future.
Communism lay in shambles. The conspirators of the old order had been pushed aside, defeated. After 1,000 years of totalitarian rule and 3 nightmarish days, the power seemed at last to rest in the hands of the people.
The Soviet people jammed the streets of Moscow, celebrating their victory.
I came here to support my people.
The most important thing is so that these 2 days of history are not repeated, and so that we never have to live through it again.
I express our deep gratitude to the heroic citizens of Moscow who surrounded our building for 3 days and prevented it from being attacked.
the barricades begin to come down, as those who died in the resistance are praised.
It's terrible that people died, that young people died in this unequal combat. I would like to propose that they be buried in the Kremlin wall.
For those responsible, the 8 conspirators, the reckless adventure is over. One by one, they face their fate. Prime Minister Pavlov, hospitalized for high blood pressure, then forced to sign his own arrest warrant. KGB Chairman Khrushchev, disgraced before Soviet TV cameras. Defense Minister Yazov, the same. Interior Minister Pugo commits suicide as police come to arrest him. And the others, Yanayev, Baklanov, Starodubtsev, and Tyzyakov, all charged with treason, all faced the death penalty. A shaken Gorbachev receives an ovation at a news conference. He fumbles with his pen, has trouble controlling himself when talking about those who betrayed him.
These people are advanced. I believe them. I trusted them, and it turned out not only were they participants in this plot against the president, against the constitutional order, against perestroika, against civil order, against democracy.
Gorbachev moves quickly to purge his disloyal cabinet and names new leaders for the defense ministry and KGB. And in a promise he would soon break, the Soviet president vows he will rebuild the Communist Party, not abandon it.
I am one of those people who's never concealed his position. I am convinced socialism is correct. I do not intend to yield my position, and I will fight to the end for renewal of this party.
But Mikhail Sergeyevich Gorbachev has returned to a changed world. At the press conference, a journalist chastises him for standing by the party. And outside the very bastion of totalitarianism, KGB headquarters, an incredible scene. Muscovites vent their fury on the statue of Felix Dzerzhinsky, founder of the KGB, ripping from its foundation the figurehead of Soviet repression and control.
But I think anybody attempting another coup would have to be out of their minds to take on hundreds of thousands of people who clearly want to see democracy prevail. And that's what it was about. That's what the message was about. That's what the survival of Gorbachev was about. That's what the strength of Yeltsin was about.
Gorbachev's survival, Yeltsin's strength, triumphs for the Soviet people. But also the beginning of a monumental struggle that will shape the future of the Soviet system. At an historic Russian parliament session, Yeltsin humiliates Gorbachev, forcing him to read the minutes of a cabinet meeting held during the coup. Only 2 of Gorbachev's hand-picked ministers opposed his ouster. Then, in a direct challenge to Gorbachev's power, Yeltsin cancels Gorbachev's appointments and names his own men to run the defense ministry and KGB. And as Gorbachev looks on, helplessly, Yeltsin, with the stroke of a pen, shuts down the Communist Party on Russian soil. It must have been a strange moment for Gorbachev. He was now being bested by a one-time protege who had saved his presidency. In 1985, both shared a vision of reform. Gorbachev, then the new party general secretary, brought Yeltsin to Moscow, where he quickly became a member of the Politburo. But 2 years later, Gorbachev fired him, punishment for Yeltsin's accusations that reforms were moving too slowly. In political circles, Yeltsin always had a reputation as a hooligan, impulsive, uncouth, authoritarian, difficult to work with, a hard drinker. Yet to the Russian people, he has a special magnetism. After quitting the Communist Party, Yeltsin began a political ascension that in 1991 made him the first freely elected president of the Russian Republic. He won in a landslide.
Клянусь при осуществлении полномочий президента.
And now, after the failed coup, Boris Yeltsin becomes the dominant figure in Soviet politics. The world sees him differently, too.
And as I saw Mr. Yeltsin courageous, bold, decisive, we were cheering here. Cheering because you had the leadership, he had many, many people behind him, then all of the people, as they learned, came out to be with him.
Yeltsin moves quickly to consolidate his power. He orders the seizure of Communist Party headquarters in Moscow and takes control of government communications. The pragmatic and canny Gorbachev must now fight for his own political survival, still backing a discredited Communist Party.
In the whole history of the Communist Party, it never told the truth. Its politics were based on a lie.
We want to live like human beings. We don't need communism. We've had enough.
Momentum against communism grows. Across the Union, Communist Party offices are locked up or sacked. In the Baltics, crowds jeer as Soviet troops drive away. And everywhere, the past is laid to rest. Still, Gorbachev will not leave the party. He prefers to press for change.
He's a believer. He thinks he can reform the party. I don't believe it. The party cannot be reformed. Where were they on the first, second, third day, when there was a real threat? Everyone there kept silent.
On Saturday, thousands of Muscovites gather to honor the rebellion's martyrs. Dmitry Komar, 23-year-old forklift driver and Afghanistan war hero, crushed as he climbed onto a tank. Ilya Krychevsky, 28-year-old architect, shot at point-blank range when he tried to mount an armored vehicle. Vladimir Usov, 37-year-old accountant, run over by a tank. Then the news sweeps Moscow, an announcement on Soviet TV. In a stunning turnaround, Mikhail Gorbachev quits the Communist Party. He takes steps to dismantle what he had vowed to protect only days before. The comparison is irresistible. The burial of the martyrs, the burial of Lenin's Communist Party. The uncertain future of the Union, the fate of the Soviet system, all called into question on this day of mourning. For the people of the Soviet Union, it is a day to dream of new possibilities, a day to bury their tragic past.
Пусть земля вам будет пухом.
For that reason, our heroes, sleep peacefully, and let the earth be soft for you.